Home Dituno, thank you, sisters, for. Can we give them another round of applause? And also, please, a round of applause for our other speakers, Troy and Mike, who have joined us on the stage. Are we okay from the technical side?
Sure. No, is there one on there? Is there one there? No. Well, sure for now. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for that. And once again, I'm happy to be here with all of you and looking forward to engaging in a little conversation. I think we can perhaps have a few responses from the speakers based on what was just shared. Maybe there's something else they would like to add, considering what Miriam and Sutton just shared. And then we can go, as I understand it, we'll be taking questions from the audience. I was very happy to hear talk about access, benefit sharing, the understanding of engaging with international systems, the need for that. And also highlighting that here in the United States, the Convention on Biological Diversity is not the only treaty, international treaty that the U.S. hasn't signed. They are heavily involved in all the treaty systems, but they don't ratify the treaties. You know, there's very few. There's the Convention on the Rights, even the Convention on the Rights of the Child, right? I mean, it's incredible. But they are signatories, or at least in theory, in the Convention on Races Against the CERD, which is the Convention on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. So that's maybe some way also that we can follow up. But the Nagoya Protocol, as I understand it, is also applicable to sciences in the U.S. So that's a good place to begin. But Troy or Mike, based on what you heard from Sutton and Troy, is there anything else that you would like to add? That's something that came to your mind that you feel might be important to add on to this discussion of allyship?
I got one.
Troy, we'll go with you.
Yeah, one of the pieces that's very important to the Comanches is to be humble, to be modest. So when we pray, we have to humble ourselves below the peyote, which is very, very small, pray up through it, and as you heard in the song, the eagle was taking the petitions to the Almighty. So if you can stay humble, if you can stay modest in how you dress, how you speak, what you do, it's amazing how that will make things happen, will create movement.
Mike?
Yeah, I was very struck by.
Is it on? Maybe you can.
I was very struck by the thought of medicine being culture, which is very strange from a white perspective, but I've encountered this in all kinds of ways in other contexts, looking at alternative forms of mental health and so on. And I think this is one of the things that we have in the West is a very individually rooted concept of sickness, and I think indigenous perspectives challenge that very strongly. And also, let's not forget how strongly resisted those are by our Western structures. If you look at the United Nations Single Convention on Drugs, 1961, which is basically the foundations of global drug control or the war on drugs. It's very striking. The preamble to that says drugs are an evil. The word evil is not used anywhere else in the other UN documents. It's not applied to genocide, for example. It's not applied to child abuse. We're in the West coming from an institutional structure where psychedelics are, not just not recognized. There are huge institutional barriers there to thinking about this type of healing and use of these plants that we're being asked to consider.
Thank you so much for that and for enlightening us on that little aspect there. That's very important. Language in the UN system is something we all need to pay attention to, especially when we are negotiating words like should and will. Okay, so they're both going all right? All right, so maybe you can pass one down to, yeah, great. So now that you have the mic, Miriam, maybe we can just, before we start getting into the questions, I was happy to see that although based in the United States, you also understand that, at least from what I could see, that these borders, right, are the result of colonialism, and that even many indigenous peoples are now find them, some tribes, for example, like my own, find themselves on opposite sides of a border, either north or south, and because some communities are on one side and some communities on the other side, they have certain rights, or certain rights are recognized over others. Can you just add a little bit more about, since you're, for example, going into the Amazon, into Colombia and perhaps other places, how you connect that work with what's happening here in the United States? How do you see that vision? And either you or Sutton really can address that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that one of the reasons why we initiated the Indigenous Medicine Conservation Fund is that what we were finding in assessments is that some of the issues were the same. The character and the needs of the different biocultures are very different, but everywhere it was territory, language, support for good governance, unity between people to create strength, engaging with their own governance and other governance, doing multicultural and intergenerational work, and then just infrastructure support to be able to get around, move elders around. I mean, a lot of fuel. And so these things were common across all of these different biocultures that have various different kind of threats. And so what we realized is that if we could work across them, there would actually probably be a lot of learning about how to address those things that were in common, and a lot of support across cultures that could be given. But I don't know, another thing I would say about this is just with the peyote work that we've been supporting, the unity between Mexico, the US, and Canada has been extremely important. It's very delicate, it's very careful with people. There's a lot of cultural nuance. It gets very disrupted by what's going on in the wider world. But it's very clear, like we actually just got a letter in from some folks in Mexico who basically were reiterating from their elders that if they don't have unity across the tribes on both sides of the Rio Grande, that they're not going to be able to protect their medicine. And that means like literally from mining companies and from agro-industrial. And so that, yeah, I guess that's what I would say, is that, you know, sometimes the differentiation is really important and sometimes the unity is really important. And as a funder and a supporter and an ally, it's really interesting. There's a lot of nuance about when to support unity and when to support caucusing and people having their own spaces, and that's part of what we've learned to just listen and respond to. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
I think you pretty much hit on the head there, but I would say that what was coming up for me, I remember I had the privilege of sitting in the, or serving on the Global Youth Caucus for the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. I remember being in a talking circle with many Indigenous youth from all over the world. And as we sat in that talking circle, the tears we shed, the stories we shared were also similar. Like Miriam said, culture, land, the historical and intergenerational trauma, reclaiming what was stolen from us. And I think that unity is so important across the board. I'm Oneida, I'm Haudenosaunee, so I come from what's known as the Iroquois Confederacy. And so really what happened there is we had 6 warring tribes that band together in the face of colonialism to really bury our weapons under the tree of peace, to come together, to protect our culture, to protect our land, to protect each other. So I think that it's important when we're thinking about, you know, indigeneity, and understanding that we need to be inclusive, we need to not look look at colonial borders as a way to measure who is or who isn't, and that's really central to the Urban Indigenous Collective, who's really broadened our definition of what it means to be urban Native American, not really adhering to that federal definition, not adhering to blood quantum, these really old tools that are really designed to erase us, to eliminate us. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And one of the things, I'm just going to toot your horn for a second. One of the things Sutton's going to be doing is in this Nagoya Protocol process that we're going through, is she's actually going to be translating the results of looking at what the frameworks are for each of these medicines in the different countries into really usable sets of information about people's rights on the ground. And those will be different in the different countries, but the process will be similar.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I trust that you also use the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People also as a guideline as well. Of course you will. And so I thank you for that. And I'm looking for our timekeeper just to make sure that I'm on schedule. But I imagine that at this point, now that we've heard a little bit, some feedback from the presentations, that we can take some questions from the audience. And so I'm not sure how that's going to work. Oh, there you are. So why don't we do that? If you all are okay with that, we'll go right to our questions. And I think I see somebody there. There's something blocking me, so that's it. Yep.
Hi everyone, thank you so much. I've been waiting for this talk all week long. My name is Paula Graciela Khan. On my mother's side, I am of Mayan and Iberian ancestry. 2020 was the deadliest year for environmental defenders around the world, who faced the highest number of assassinations on record, 227 murders, averaging out to 4 assassinations per week throughout the year, according to Global Witness. Impunity for crimes against Indigenous land defenders remains shockingly high. Up to 95% of murders do not result in prosecution. What is the psychedelic research and therapy movement's responsibility to defending Indigenous rights and Indigenous land sovereignty movements within and beyond U.S. borders when foreign military aid funded by U.S. taxpayer dollars are structural factors driving violence towards Indigenous communities, increasing mortality and adverse health outcomes in Indigenous communities south of the U.S. border and in the U.S. immigration detention system? What does solidarity and reciprocity mean when Indigenous environmental defenders from communities with ancestral relationships to plant medicine are facing armed forces?
We're going to take a few questions and then have the panel respond. Should we do about 3 at a time and then have folks respond to what they can?
That's going to be hard. That was a long question.
One at a time?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, yeah. So thank you for that. I'd just like to share my relative, Ingrid Washiwatok, world-renowned Indigenous environmental activist, was assassinated, in 1999 in Colombia while she was doing work with the UWA. So that question really touches my heart. We recently just put a mural in Bushwick, 41 White Street, honoring the missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, trans, and two-spirit database and movement, and honoring Ingrid's legacy and everything she's done for community. And so I just want to share that's a personal connection for me. And the psychedelic space is accountable, is responsible, and there needs to be resources to support our activists. There needs to be resources to support our missing and murdered. There needs to be support across the board, and that's what we're doing here with the Urban Indigenous Collective, is advocating for that. And we need folks to be allies and get behind the Indigenous-led movements that are doing the grassroots on the ground and across the globe, because yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you that in the last 2 weeks, we've supported 2 different activists in the Amazon to be able to hide because their lives are at threat, and tried to connect them with, there's different groups that do defend the defender. But I think your question also gets to this piece of what is an ally. If we want to support ancestral knowledge holders in their territories with the things that actually matter to them in their daily lives for their survival so that their traditions can continue, that means getting involved in a lot of things. It means being an environmentalist, it means being a social activist. And so, I think one of the things that happened for me with this preparing for this talk is I kept getting these heart palpitations, and I was really looking at it, and I realized when you start really sitting into what it means to be an ally and to medicine cultures, which is a strong thing, that it's so many things. It's a whole system, it's a whole ecology, and you don't get to back up, and once you're in it, you gotta keep going. And so yeah, thank you for your question. A lot. Mm-hmm.
All right. Next question.
Hi, I'm David Borden, Executive Director of StopTheDrugWar.org. And should I take this off, or can you hear? Can you hear okay? Okay. Hi, I'm David Borden, Executive Director of the group StopTheDrugWar.org, also longtime fan of River Styx, and this sounds like an incredible effort you're making here. I'm looking forward to reading up on it. My question has to do with decriminalization, and I was wondering if it's appropriate for you to relate that here, what the concerns are of indigenous groups with regard to decrim. And I think you said it was peyote specifically. Is it a concern that the supply could get sucked away and not get replaced and it won't be available, or are there other concerns as well? And relatedly, have discussions taken place about under what scenarios might indigenous groups lean towards favoring decrim or even legalization, or is this something more fundamental that wouldn't be likely to change? Thanks.
All right, so yes, of course, there's a supply and demand concern. This is a threatened species, right? And there is a concern that even with decriminalization or legalization, even if people were growing it in greenhouses or whatever, that it would impact the gardens. And that's a clear concern. But the bigger concern that has to do with allyship is about consent. It's about consultation. It's about honoring the American Indian Religious Freedom Act, which was hard won through a very, very difficult history, which gave people their religious freedom for their medicine, for their feathers, for their ceremonies, the things that have them be resilient. And it's just, I mean, I don't know if this is the right word, but to me it's just manners that you actually honor the IRFA amendment, and you honor indigenous medicine, traditional knowledge holders by just doing what they ask, even if you maybe have some idea that you think it might look better some other way. And so that's what I would share about that.
Yeah. All right, next question.
Hi, so nice to meet you all. My name's Nikki. I'm a researcher at NYU Langone Center for Psychedelic Medicine. I've only been working there for a year, so I'm pretty new to everything, but I'm hoping to practice medicine in the future. Yeah, I thought what was most interesting was you talking about the San Pedros popping up when you did these chants, and basically you're saying that there's some kind of sentience in these beings. And personally, I don't know as a doctor if I'm gonna want to take on the responsibility to release a sentient being on someone, or I don't even know what that means or implies. And I think we don't know much at all, like Westerners in general, so it's really great to kind of hear that perspective. When you're kind of saying we need to build the plants in this kind of way and nurture them in this kind of way. Is that because you're mostly owing it to your culture, or is it owing it to the plants? Do we have a responsibility more so to protecting these plants as if they're a creature?
You're asking me that? Yeah. Good. I got it. The plants let us know what they need. And we follow by having manners, honoring what we get from them. And as we live a life where we try to take down our ego all the time, ceremonially, we get things from the animals, the plants, that we didn't get before. So we try, that's that part again about be humble, come from that place. Remember, we have 2 ears and 2 eyes and only 1 mouth. So listen, watch, and then talk.
Wonderful. Okay, I think we have 2 questions. I see 2 folks left. And are we coming to getting close to our time to end? All right, we're at time's up, so we'll take these final ones. We'll try to be brief. And please, next question.
Oh, sure. I just want to ask how you would define the word medicine.
Mike, maybe we could start with you, and then we'll go, because you haven't had a chance. I'd like to hear your perspective on this one.
Sure, I think that's a great question, and I think it really gets to the heart of a lot of what we're talking about. The indigenous definition of medicine is so much more generous. You know, I think the Western idea of medicine is, as I mentioned, it's kind of biologically rooted. It's something that has to work exclusively on that level and have a kind of demonstrable method of action. I don't think we've always had that in the West. Back in ancient Greek culture, the word was pharmakon. You know, that's the word that gives us pharmacy. And I think actually like that ancient idea of pharmakon that we had in the West is much closer to the indigenous idea of medicine, because a pharmakon is not necessarily a medicine. It's something that accomplishes something. It could be a tool, or it could be a trick, or it could be a trick of the mind, or it could be a way of doing something. You know, it's something that enables you to change your relationship with the world. And so I think we've kind of, we've maybe in the West kind of lost or shrunk or narrowed down this more expansive or generous idea that we did actually once have.
Anyone else from the panel want to add to that?
Real simply, medicine for us is something when the plant honors us and we honor the plant back.
Wonderful, bringing up that idea of reciprocity once again. And I think we have, oh, no more questions? Oh, I thought I saw one more person standing there, or no? No, that's it. Okay, great. Are you standing there asking? Oh, okay. I'm getting the sign that we're done. So I want to thank all of our distinguished panelists. I think we have a lot of information to process and a lot of work moving forward.
Feel funny sitting down.
So please take a stand. And
good job, you two.
I think we'll be exiting soon.